My name is Rachel Donovan, and if you'd asked me 2 years ago what I thought love was, I would have said it was the little things: coffee ready before I woke up, a shared smile across the kitchen, or the quiet safety of knowing someone had your back. For 12 years, my husband Ethan and I built what I thought was the perfect life: a modest home in Portland, 2 kids who adored their dad, and a marriage that I believed was built on trust. But life has a cruel way of reminding you that perfection is fragile, and secrets, no matter how buried, have a way of finding light. It started with something small, as most cracks do. Ethan had been coming home later than usual. He'd say traffic was bad or that a client needed an urgent call. I didn't think much of it at first. Ethan was an architect, long hours came with the territory. But then came the silences. The way he'd stare at his phone and lock it the moment I entered the room. The way laughter faded between us, replaced by polite questions and careful answers. I remember one night vividly. The rain tapped softly against our windows as I packed lunches for the next day. Ethan sat at the table scrolling on his phone, smiling faintly. "What's funny?" I asked, trying to sound casual. He looked up too quickly. "Just a meme," he said, flipping his phone upside down. I nodded, but something in me twisted, a quiet knowing I couldn't explain. The following weekend, I found a receipt in his jacket pocket when I was doing laundry. A restaurant I'd never heard of, dinner for 2, last Thursday. My hands trembled, not out of anger yet, but confusion. We hadn't gone out in weeks. I didn't want to believe the worst. So, I asked him. Ethan looked at the paper, his face unreadable. "It was with a client," he said, tone firm but distant. "You know how these meetings go." I wanted to believe him. So I did. For a while, but my heart wouldn't rest. There were moments when his cologne smelled different, when he'd go for a walk after dinner just to clear his head, or when he'd turn his phone off completely in the evenings. It wasn't that I didn't trust him, I didn't trust the version of him I was seeing. Then, one Saturday morning, while cleaning the study, I found a small box tucked behind his work files. Inside were photographs, old ones. Ethan, younger, standing beside a woman with soft brown hair and kind eyes. In every picture, she smiled at him like he was her world. I didn't know her, but I recognized love when I saw it. When he came home that night, I asked him who she was. For a long time, he said nothing. Then he sat down, his shoulders sagging. "Her name was Laura," he said quietly. "We were engaged before I met you." I blinked. "Engaged?" He nodded. "She died in a car accident. I never told you because I wanted to move on. I didn't want my past to define our present." I didn't know what to say. My anger softened into something else, confusion, maybe empathy, but there was something strange about the way he said died. Like the word didn't sit right in his mouth. Over the next few weeks, I noticed him driving out early on Sundays. He said he was visiting a project site. But one morning, curiosity, or maybe pain, pushed me to follow. I drove behind him quietly for miles until he pulled up beside a small, quiet cemetery. I watched as he walked to a headstone, laid flowers, and stood there for a long time. When he turned, his face wasn't grief-stricken. It was peaceful, like he'd found something in those moments that he couldn't find at home. And that realization broke me. That evening, I confronted him again. "Why didn't you tell me you still visit her?" I asked. He sighed. "Because you'd never understand. Try me." He looked up, eyes glassy. "Because she didn't die in that crash, Rachel. She survived. But she disappeared. Everyone thought she was gone. I found her last year. She has a family now. A husband, a daughter. I didn't want to ruin her life. I just needed to know she was okay." I felt the air leave my lungs. For 12 years, I had loved a man who carried another life in his heart. "And what about me?" I whispered. "What about the family you built now?" He looked broken. "I love you, Rachel. But part of me never healed. I didn't mean for you to find out like this." In that moment, anger gave way to heartbreak. Because betrayal isn't always about cheating, it's about secrets that make you feel like a stranger in your own marriage. The weeks that followed were a blur of quiet dinners and sleepless nights. I tried to forgive, but forgiveness requires understanding, and I didn't understand why he couldn't just let the past go. Every smile felt rehearsed. Every "I love you" came out strained. The man who once felt like home now felt like a memory. Then came the night he didn't come home. I waited, staring at my phone as the clock ticked past midnight. When I finally heard the key in the door, he looked exhausted. "I was driving," he said. "I just needed time to think." That was the night I decided to stop waiting. I told him I needed space. He didn't argue. He just nodded, as if he'd been expecting it. I took the kids and went to stay with my sister in Seattle. There, for the first time in years, I slept without anxiety. I started journaling again, writing down the pieces of myself I'd lost along the way. Slowly, I began to see that maybe love isn't just about staying, it's about knowing when to walk away from something that no longer feels safe. Months passed. Ethan wrote letters, handwritten, careful, full of regret. He never begged, he just told me he hoped I'd find peace. Sometimes I read them and cried. Other times, I tucked them away. A year later, I got an invitation to his art gallery opening, something he'd always dreamed of doing but never had the courage for. I almost didn't go, but something inside me said closure deserved a face. When I arrived, I saw him across the room. He looked older, calmer. There was a painting in the center, a quiet landscape of a house by the sea. Beneath it was a plaque that read, "For Rachel. For the home she made, and the love I couldn't hold." I didn't approach him. I didn't need to. Our eyes met, and in that look, everything was said, the love, the pain, the acceptance. As I walked out into the cold evening air, I realized something. Trust, once broken, can't always be rebuilt. But sometimes, it transforms into something else, respect, maybe, or quiet understanding. The kind that lets you move on without bitterness. Life didn't end that day in our marriage, it changed shape. I built something new. I started teaching art at a local school, and every time I told my students about the power of truth, I remembered Ethan, not as the man who betrayed me, but as the man who taught me that love without honesty isn't love at all. If you asked me now what love means, I'd say it's not about perfection. It's about truth. And sometimes, choosing yourself is the bravest kind of love there is.